What would you think if I told you that male desire is not love, not intimacy, not safety, but something darker, rawer, and far less forgiving? Most women spend years mistaking a man's lust for devotion, only to realize too late that desire follows no moral script. What looks like romance on the surface is often a primitive force buried deep in the unconscious. And once you know the truth, you'll never look at male attraction the same way again. 1. The predator beneath his smile. Why does a man look at a woman as if she is the only one in the room, and yet that same gaze disappears the moment she surrenders? Why does desire shrink once it is fed? The paradox lies in this brutal truth. Male longing is often bound not to possession, but to pursuit. Desire lives in the gap between want and conquest. It is not the love story women are told, but the hidden script of the hunter. The conflict arises because women often mistake intensity for security. That first stare, the electric pull, feels eternal. Yet in the male psyche, it is linked to the archetype of the predator. Jung revealed that within every man lives this unconscious force, the shadow hunter. He is not nurtured by intimacy. He is wired to seek the thrill of chase. And many women surrender too quickly, believing devotion is born from fire, when in truth, fire burns out faster than they imagined. The consequence of this blindness? Women confuse desire with worth. They give themselves to men who only wanted the spark, not the flame. They grieve when his love dulls, when his texts fade, when his pursuit turns to silence, not realizing this was his pattern all along. Some women even try harder, thinking their increased affection will reignite him. But the more she chases him, the more he withdraws. The empowered path begins when a woman refuses to shrink into prey. Shadow work demands she recognizes the predator for what he is, not as a demon, but as an archetype, a natural force. Not all men are chained by it, but many are unconscious of its grip. Individuation for a woman means no longer mistaking pursuit for presence. Picture this: a lioness who does not flinch when a hunter appears. She does not run. She does not plead. She only stands in her power, knowing that her worth is not proven in being caught. Your soul was never created to be hunted. It was created to be crowned. And once this is known, a new question emerges. If pursuit fades once won, then what deeper truth lies beneath his hunger? That leads us to the next revelation. 2. Desire thrives on distance. Why is it that the more available a woman becomes, the less desirable she seems to certain men? Why does closeness not guarantee loyalty, but instead expose distance? The hidden truth is this: desire in the male psyche does not grow in the familiar. It grows in the space between. The paradox for women is cruel. She offers her devotion thinking it will anchor him, but often, the moment she gives fully, his unconscious shadow whispers, "Retreat." In Jungian terms, his animus projection, the image of what he longs for, cannot live in reality. It survives best in fantasy, in mystery, in what he does not fully hold. And so, women who silence themselves, trying to be perfect loves, often awaken to a brutal truth. Perfection breeds predictability, and predictability starves certain men of desire. This does not mean women must become illusions. It means they must stop bleeding themselves dry under the false belief that being fully available keeps him close. The suffering rooted in this ignorance is sharp. Many women confuse rejection with failure, thinking if they were more beautiful, quieter, more compliant, he would have stayed. When in reality, it is not her weakness that killed his desire, but her availability that dismantled his shadowed hunger. The empowered path forward: mystery without games. A woman who does not vanish into his expectations, but retains her essence, her sacred distance, being loving but not erasing, being present but not smothering. This balance is not performance, it is individuation, where she recognizes that the deepest respect comes from boundaries. Imagine a flame in the darkness. If you clutch it too tightly, it dies. If you let it breathe, it grows. Desire, too, needs oxygen, not suffocation. He who loses mystery loses longing. The predator chases, the distance sustains. Together they reveal a cruel symmetry, and yet this is only the beginning, because beyond pursuit and distance lies the most dangerous revelation of all, the shadow of rejection that reshapes a woman's entire self-worth. And that is where we turn next. 3. Rejection as the mirror of worth. Why is rejection by a man so often experienced as a rejection of the self? Why does his turning away feel less like a choice and more like proof that she is not enough? The paradox lies in how women attach their self-worth to male desire, as if his gaze defines their beauty, their lovability, their very essence. But rejection, in reality, speaks less about her value and more about the shadows he refuses to confront within himself. The psychological conflict emerges here. Many women grow up conditioned to measure their worth through male validation. From the earliest signs of attraction, approval becomes a mirror. If a man chooses her, she shines. If he withdraws, she begins to dim. This dependence on external choosing becomes deadly because rejection cuts deeper than it should. It pierces through her identity and makes her blind to her inherent wholeness. The consequences of this unawareness are devastating. Repeated rejection can lead women into cycles of self-betrayal. They lower their standards, they endure neglect, they silence their boundaries, believing that if they fix themselves, someone will finally stay. This thinking enslaves them to a game they were never meant to play. Some drift from one unfulfilled relationship to another, always asking, "Why am I not enough?" Not realizing that the question itself is a wound implanted by shadow conditioning. Jung spoke of the process of individuation as confronting the projections we place upon others. For women, this moment comes when they realize a man's withdrawal is not proof of their inadequacy, but the reflection of his unconscious conflicts. She begins to see rejection not as an end, but as revelation. The rejection does not shrink her, it exposes what he could not hold. Imagine a queen standing in her throne room. A visitor refuses to bow and turns away. Does the queen beg him to stay? No, she understands that his dismissal does not diminish her crown. Her crown remains whether he sees it or not. You do not lose worth when someone walks away. You only lose illusions. And yet, rejection does not just break self-worth, it leaves behind a dangerous temptation, the urge to chase the unavailable. And it is within this compulsion that another deeper shadow begins to reveal itself. 4. The addiction to the unavailable. Why do so many women feel irresistibly drawn to men who resist them, who cannot give love freely, who remain forever out of reach? Why does the unavailable man often feel like the most intoxicating prize? The secret lies in a twisted psychological loop. The unavailable man activates the ancient wound of abandonment. His distance awakens the unresolved child within, that part longing to heal by conquering the affection once denied. This is the emotional conflict. Women do not pursue unavailability because he is better. They pursue him because he mirrors the earliest experience of conditional love. Perhaps a father was emotionally absent. Perhaps early affection was mixed with withdrawal. Whatever the origin, the psyche repeats what is familiar because it confuses repetition with healing. The unavailable man, paradoxically, feels familiar. He feels like home, not because he is right, but because he embodies the wound. The consequences here are sharp and enduring. Women caught in this loop spend years, even decades, in dead-end relationships where they are starved of intimacy yet addicted to the crumbs he offers. Every text, every moment of fleeting attention feels like oxygen to a drowning soul. But the drowning never ends. Life becomes an endless pursuit of scraps, mistaking survival for love. The empowered path comes only through shadow integration. The woman must ask, is my hunger for him truly about him? Or is it about the little girl within me still trying to win an affection that will never be supplied by his hands? Individuation requires her to step back, to see the addictive pull not as love, but as a wound crying for healing. The metaphor is hauntingly clear, a wanderer in the desert chasing mirages that vanish when touched. The sand offers no water, yet she continues to run, dehydrated by illusions. Liberation begins when she refuses to chase smoke and chooses to seek rivers within herself. Stop running toward the empty. Build where the water flows, and in breaking this loop, everything changes. For when she no longer craves the unavailable, something new and dangerous awakens, the power to choose without desperation. But before that, one question must pierce deeper. If desire is this chaotic, what role does power play in the way men use it? That is where we journey next. 5. Power hidden within desire. Why does male desire so often blur into domination? Why does attraction carry beneath it an unspoken urge to possess, to control, to bind? At its rawest level, desire is not simply about union. It is about power. For many men, the line between longing and conquest is razor thin, and too often, women discover too late that what they thought was love was in fact ownership. The emotional battlefield emerges here. Women give themselves in trust, believing power can coexist with tenderness. Yet a man under the grip of shadow desire does not always seek partnership. He seeks possession. His unconscious hunger is for dominance masked as affection. Jung spoke of the shadow as the fragmented force one refuses to acknowledge. And in men, the shadow often manifests as the instinct to bend intimacy into hierarchy. The consequences of ignoring this truth are brutal. Women wake up in relationships where they no longer have agency. Their dressing, their friendships, their ambitions, all subtly contorted to fit within his grip. He calls it love, but the energy behind it feels suffocating. She feels chosen, but imprisoned, wanted, but silenced. Too many realize the chains only after the shackles begin to rust against their skin. The empowered path begins with recognition. Desire and dominance are not always the same, but often they walk hand in hand in the shadow of unconscious male psychology. A woman who confronts this truth does not demonize masculinity, but sees it clearly. She allows desire to reach her, but she does not surrender her throne. Individuation here means seeing love not as a chain, but as an alliance, a bond where two stand equal rather than one eclipsing the other. Imagine a falcon. Its wings are wide, magnificent. If captured, caged, and adored, it withers. If allowed to soar, it returns by choice. True power in love is freedom, not imprisonment. When he must control to keep you, he has already lost you. The predator chased, the unavailable resisted. Now the power binder seeks to confine. But hidden in all this is a greater wound, because what terrifies a man more than losing possession is being vulnerable. And that shadow is where we turn next. 6. His fear of devouring vulnerability. Why do so many men, even those who deeply desire a woman, retreat when true intimacy begins to unfold? Why does he withdraw just as her soul starts to open, as if closeness itself threatens his very being? The hidden truth is this: Male desire is built not only on hunger, but on fear. The fear that real intimacy will strip him bare, devour his defenses, and unmask the fragile boy hiding beneath his armor. This conflict runs deep in male psychology. The archetypal hunter is untouchable when chasing, unshaken when controlling. But intimacy dismantles his fortress. True closeness demands vulnerability, and this is precisely what his shadow cannot bear. Desire thrives when veiled in distance, in struggle, in fantasy. But when a woman's eyes become too knowing, when her love reveals too much, terror awakens. He flees not because she is unworthy, but because his own soul trembles at the mirror she holds up. The consequence for women is profoundly wounding. She opens her heart, thinking her vulnerability will deepen the connection. Instead, his withdrawal strikes her like rejection, confirming old fears that intimacy pushes men away. Women internalize this wound, turning intimacy into shame, blaming themselves for revealing too much. They often silence their truth in future encounters, carrying the belief that their depth is too heavy, too suffocating, too much. But the shadow work solution is liberation. She must understand that his fear belongs to him, not to her offerings. A man who cannot withstand intimacy has yet to face his own shadow of inadequacy. A woman's individuation pathway is not to shrink her soul, but to refuse to believe her sacred vulnerability is poison. She must allow her fullness to stand as a filter, not a flaw, disqualifying those who cannot rise into it. The symbol is clear, a sacred temple, burning incense in the night. Only those willing to enter with reverence may experience its glow. The temple does not dim its flame for the timid, it shines, knowing the unready will walk away. Your vulnerability is not weakness, it is flame, and only the strong dare hold its light. But here lies the twist. Fear of intimacy is not just a male struggle, it becomes a manipulation. Men weaponize their retreat, keeping women caught between craving his return and fearing his distance. And it is this dangerous pendulum between pull and push that forms the next revelation. 7. The push-pull game of desire. Why does he draw closer only after drifting away? Why does his absence ignite her hunger and his return feel like salvation? The raw truth is this. Male desire often thrives in tension, a psychological dance of pull and withdrawal that keeps women chained in uncertainty. This push-pull cycle is not always conscious, but it is destructive. Desire becomes a weapon, not a gift. The emotional struggle here is haunting. When he withdraws, she panics. When he returns, she feels redeemed. Each cycle deepens her dependence, not on love itself, but on the unpredictable rhythm of his attention. This pattern activates the brain's own addiction pathways, turning his inconsistent affection into something more intoxicating than steady devotion ever could. She confuses the drama of uncertainty with the depth of intimacy. The consequence is a life built on emotional volatility. Women locked in this cycle find themselves waiting by phones, replaying conversations, second-guessing every word and choice, enslaved not by who he is, but by how he withholds. The more absent he becomes, the more consuming her desire grows. And with every return, her nervous system learns to equate suffering with love. In Jungian terms, this is the shadow of eros corrupted. Instead of connection leading toward union, connection mutates into dependency. The woman's animus projection, the image of divine masculine energy she unconsciously seeks, is replaced by a man whose inconsistency destroys her grounding. Yet the psyche remains loyal to its pain because the wound feels familiar, and what is familiar is mistaken for fate. The empowered path emerges by breaking the addiction. Shadow work demands she recognizes the pattern not as intimacy, but as manipulation, whether deliberate or unconscious. She must see that his withdrawal is not proof of her unworthiness, but evidence of his inability to nourish stability. Individuation here means decoupling love from drama, attraction from volatility. Visualize a pendulum swinging violently. Each surge forward excites, each retreat terrifies. But liberation begins when she stills the pendulum, when she steps out of its chaotic arc and lets it crash into silence. Love built on uncertainty is not love, it is captivity. Yet, beyond this cycle lies an even more forbidden truth, the darkest one men rarely admit and women only discover through scars. That male desire is not only hunted, distanced, or withdrawn, but also projected. And in projection, men often love not women themselves, but their own shadow mirrored back. 8. He loves the reflection, not the woman. Why does it feel at times that he is in love not with who she is, but with what she represents? Why does his desire fade the moment she reveals her real humanity? The hidden law of male desire is this: many men fall not for the woman, but for the projection she carries. She becomes a screen upon which his idealized fantasies or unresolved shadows are cast. The conflict here is devastating. A woman believes he sees her soul, her essence, when in truth he may only see the pieces of himself he wishes to reclaim. In Jungian psychology, this is the anima projection, the unconscious feminine within the male psyche, often superimposed onto the first woman who awakens it. He does not yet love her, he loves the archetype she stirs within him. The consequence is tragic repetition. Women fall into roles they were never born to play: the muse, the savior, the temptress, the healer, until the performance cracks and reality shows through. When she reveals her pain, her flaws, her individuality, the illusion collapses. He withdraws disappointed, not because she is unworthy, but because the shadowed dream dissolves. She was never truly seen at all. The suffering this breeds runs deep. Women question why the affection was so intense in the beginning, only to vanish like smoke. They wonder if they changed, if they became less radiant. But the truth is more cruel. He never fell in love with her, only with his projection mirrored in her form. The empowered path forward is refusing to be reduced to a mirror. Individuation here means stepping out of archetypal captivity. She must recognize when she is being idolized, when praise feels too extreme, too idealized, too disconnected from reality, and refuse to confuse projection with love. True connection requires him to dismantle the projection and meet her as a human soul, not a shadowed dream. The metaphor is sharp: a goddess sculpted from stone, admired from afar. But when she begins to breathe, move, and speak, the worshiper recoils, because he never wanted her alive, only frozen, only symbolic. Liberation is when the goddess smashes the pedestal, refusing to be stone flesh for anyone's fantasy. He does not love when he worships. He only loves when he stays after the illusion breaks. And here, the arc of revelation ends with fire, from the predator who hunts, to the distance that sustains, to the rejection that wounds, to the addiction to the unavailable. From the shadow of domination, to the fear of intimacy, to the push-pull addiction, and finally, to the projection of fantasies, male desire is far darker, more primitive, and far less forgiving than women are taught to believe. Quick recap of the secrets. The predator beneath his smile. Desire devours the chase, not the union. It is fire that dies the moment it is claimed. To mistake pursuit for presence is to become prey. Desire thrives on distance. He burns brightest in the shadows of what he cannot grasp. Closeness kills the fantasy that keeps him enthralled. The sacred feminine survives only by keeping her own space alive. Rejection as the mirror of worth. His silence does not devalue you, it unmasks him. Rejection is not a verdict, but an unveiling. What you lose is never yourself, but only the illusion. The addiction to the unavailable. The absent man awakens the oldest wound. What feels like passion is only childhood hunger reborn. Chasing what withdraws is nothing but worship at an empty altar. Power hidden within desire. His hunger is laced with dominion. What he calls love may be a cage forged in shadow. When chains appear as devotion, your crown is already slipping. His fear of devouring vulnerability. The hunter shrinks before the naked truth. Your intimacy feels like his unraveling. His distance is not your flaw, but his fragile terror. The push-pull game of desire. He starves you, then feeds you, until craving becomes captivity. Every withdrawal binds you tighter to volatility. Drama is not love. It is addiction disguised as passion. He loves the reflection, not the woman. Too often he worships his own shadow in your face. You were pedestal, not partner, idol, not soul. Love that dies when the illusion cracks was never love at all. The truths revealed tonight are brutal, yet they are sacred. Desire is a mirror, a flame, a wound, and a cage, but also a passage. You are not here to be hunted, caged, or worshipped as an image. You are here to stand whole, unbroken, unmirrored, beyond the games of shadowed longing. To see through these patterns is not to grow bitter, but to awaken. Male desire may be dark, primitive, and unforgiving, but your worth exists before its gaze and beyond its reach. Shadow work does not destroy love, it sanctifies it. It strips away the addicting mirages, the illusions of power, the worship of reflection, until only truth remains. And in truth, you do not wait for his desire. You become flame itself. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Tonight, perhaps you have seen how desire once disguised itself as fate. But now, fate dissolves and freedom whispers. Your silence isn't weakness, it's initiation. Every boundary is a sacred hymn. Every refusal to beg is an act of worship to your own soul. To love from power, not from fear, that is your passage. To no longer perform, but to be. Subscribe to Jung Mind, not to follow, but to descend deeper, where your shadow speaks and your soul finally listens. And now, let this final question rest within you like a haunting echo. What part of you is still kneeling at an altar that was never worthy of your devotion?